All right, so recently I was taking a look at a couple of different things, the 6-core CPUs, Intel and AMD, and then I was testing those with an RTX 3060 because I hadn't had a chance to do that yet. Which brought to mind the fact that I also have an RX 6600 XT. So the RTX 3060, RX 6600 XT, might as well check those against each other, right? So there's a couple things that when I look at both of these cards, I'm trying to figure out what's the best use case for which area, or what is the best what's the best reason to buy one over the other. And similar to the 6-core 12-thread CPUs from both Intel and AMD, both of these seem to be pretty close, and there doesn't seem to be any one factor that tells me I need to have one over the other, unless I'm just, say, upgrading on the AMD platform or something like that. And I would get the AMD processor instead of the Intel processor. I would rather just buy the processor instead of having to buy a whole new setup. Graphics cards don't have that problem. Graphics cards will work anywhere. So I can buy a GPU from either company and put it with a setup, motherboard and processor from any other company. So they will all operate pretty much the same. GPU to GPU will be different for each processor, but basically, if you've got a setup, you can use any brand of graphics processor you want. So in a case like this, where we're looking at cards, we want to look at something similar performance. Both of these are in the 60 tier, or in this case, in AMD, it's a 600 tier. But both of these are supposed to be about the same product, or about the same level of product. Then we get to look at the price. For a while, AMD was cheaper. And I say for a while because I am going to make a note of this, that the RTX 3060 right now is selling anywhere from $350 to $450. That depends on what model you're getting, if you're getting a factory overclocked, if you're getting a white one, or RGB, or something, something that sets it apart, or something that makes it more expensive. And the RX 6600 XT, similar model. It's going to be the similar thing, between $350 and $450, depending on what type you get, what brand name you get, if it's factory overclocked, the same type of thing. You can get both of these for as low as around $350. You can get both of these for, I'm not going to say as high as, because I'm sure you can find them higher, but the top end, they top out around $450, usually around retail. Now, the RX 6600, the non-XT variant, the one that's about 10% worse performance than the XT, that for a while was selling between $200 and $220, and that is a phenomenal deal. It's not like that anymore. GPU prices started going up just before Christmas, and now we're back up to where these two cards that are similar are a similar price, and so we have to use other things to try to make up our mind of which one that we might want to buy. So we look at them head to head. If we're looking at them head to head, then we got to do, take care or look at some benchmarks and try to see if one stands out over the other one. And as we'll go ahead and show you here, that can get confusing too. Now, originally I was just going to show 1440p numbers. These cards are driven more to that market, not top tier 4K, but not necessarily 1080p either. You can use a lower model like a RTX 3050, a 6600 or 6500 or something like that for 1080p gaming, or even the RX 480s or 580s. Those are good 1080p gaming cards. We're looking for something a little bit better, so that mid-range steps up into, say, the 1440p range. There's a lot of those monitors. They're very popular out there. And so when we're looking at that, I was just going to show 1440p numbers until I started looking at these numbers a little more and realized that doesn't tell the whole story. So I decided to go ahead and split these graphs up. Not necessarily split them up, but the top half of them are going to be 1440, high, medium, and low, or whatever. On some games it might be favorite quality, original, favorite performance, whatever the deal is. Basically, these are high, medium, and low, and I've done it for 1440p, and I've done it for 1080p. All the AMD cards are in red. All the NVIDIA cards are in green. It's easy to tell them apart, and so we're going to go ahead and do it that way. So let's go ahead and get things started. I'll show you. First of all, we're going to do Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And right out of the gate, this is one of those that it begins to look like it's an NVIDIA victory at 1440p, even though by a small margin, until we get into the lower. Now, 1440p low makes it look like an AMD, but the slight edge goes to AMD at 1080p. They're not far off from each other. They are statistically very close, unless we're looking at low detail. But this is one of those where, again, 1080 and 1440 tell a little bit slightly different story, and you know, it wouldn't be fair just to show one or the other. Borderlands 3, that is all about AMD, and if I remember right, that's an AMD optimized title, and you can definitely tell, especially when you're doing 1080p low. Now, don't get me wrong. Anything over 70 frames per second is excellent, and especially at 1440p, that's fine. And even if you step it down to medium, you're getting well over 100 frames per second. You're fine. But again, AMD edges out the NVIDIA card in this one. Far Cry 6 is another one of those that it doesn't tell the complete story if you're looking at one resolution or the other. So we have to look at both of these in 1440 and 1080p. NVIDIA looks better at 1440p as far as the number of frames per second, but these are statistically very, very close. They're almost the same. They're within a couple of percent. So it's not an easy way to tell, all the way down to 1080p where, you know, they're exactly the same. So statistically, these are within margin of error, and both of these cards end up looking just as well as each other on 1440 and 1080 on Far Cry 6. Forza Horizon 5, this surprised me a little bit, only because when we're looking at some of those upper, like extreme, ultra, and I believe maybe even on high, the default is for Forza Horizon 5, the settings to go ahead and use a ray tracing setting. Still, the AMD card did okay here, but on 1440p, again, we're seeing a little bit of a difference. Statistically, these two are very close, closer than I thought they were, but I'm not showing extreme or ultra, I'm just showing high, medium, and low here. So NVIDIA has a little bit of an edge at 1440, AMD has a little bit of an edge at 1080p. Both of them are pretty statistically close. We're almost within margin of error, so there's no winner, and more importantly, there's no loser here. World War Z is one of those titles that's obviously optimized for AMD, and it shows. And there was a couple of these that I went back and I looked because I wasn't sure that I had taken the right column when I was transferring all my numbers. What I do is I have a spreadsheet with different tabs on it for different configurations. I've got one that has NVIDIA GPUs, and I have a tab that has AMD GPUs. Under the tab that has NVIDIA GPUs, I've got the processor, and then I've got the video card at the top, and then I've got columns that have the processor that I'm testing. So all that goes in one tab, completely separate from the other tab for AMD, which again has the graphics card listed at the top, then it has some columns that have the processor. So when I put this chart together, when I took those numbers out of those columns and put them in this document or in this chart, I was really surprised to see this much of a difference. And I had to go back and make sure that I didn't get the wrong row, that I didn't put the numbers in for ultra or something instead of the numbers for high, medium, and low. I thought maybe I'd made a mistake here. As it turns out, I didn't. And we're going to see that one other time coming up. But it really, really surprised me how big of a difference this was for AMD. Horizon Zero Dawn flips back the other way. Not quite as extreme, but again, it does flip back, where it's a noticeable difference, and it's something that made me think that, again, maybe I had to be pretty careful by this point, thinking that I had done it before, and I went back and I double-checked my work again. Yes, it is that number. These are really that big of a difference, around 10%, 8 to 10% or so for NVIDIA in this other direction, so NVIDIA wins this one. Assassin's Creed Valhalla. This obviously is an AMD optimized title, and it shows. It really shows, because it's a significant victory here for AMD. And this is the other one that I had to go back and look and say, did I make sure I had the right column when I was trying to transfer these numbers? And I did. So AMD really does take advantage. I'm not sure what in this game makes AMD take so much advantage of it, where it's got almost a 30 frames per second lead in 1440p, but it was noticeable, and it really surprised me that all the way down the board. And you're thinking by this time, well, then the obvious choice is the AMD card. Well, not necessarily. Cyberpunk is another one of those that if you're just talking about the rasterization, nothing else on. Now, Cyberpunk does do one other thing we'll talk about in just a second too. If we're talking about just the way it renders the picture, AMD has the slight lead here. Cyberpunk 2077, when you're doing the settings, just the default settings, high, medium, or low, it automatically adjusts Fidelity FX, the super resolution from AMD. It automatically adjusts that for you. Now, that super resolution, that Fidelity FX works on AMD cards, it works on NVIDIA cards, it'll even work on Intel cards. So we are seeing here that obviously it's optimized really well in AMD's favor. But Cyberpunk 2077 is one of those games that does look better and does take advantage of ray tracing, several different types of ray tracing, shadows and everything else. So where this does look really good as far as just drawing the picture or just drawing all the triangles and the rasterization they call it, where this puts the image on the screen very quickly and very well, if you are implementing those other features, the NVIDIA product is going to be much better in this case. Even though these cards are very similar in performance, there's going to be a big swing from one to the other. And I might go back and I might look at a difference of that, or I might do a video just on like this, Metro Exodus, and a few others that have ray tracing baked into them that we can check and do, say, maybe Control or one or two of those others, where we can compare and see how the 6600 XT and the RTX 3060 do against each other. One, just in regular rasterization like this is, or the other side, what the big difference is in ray tracing, and just kind of compare those. Now, we are going to get some of that performance back when we use that Fidelity FX. But you can see here that AMD obviously optimizes for that. It's their product, their card, and so we see a bigger difference with the AMD card than we do the NVIDIA card. But don't fool yourself, because if I had turned ray tracing on, or if this was a true chart where I'm comparing more than one thing, which we might do later, then you would see NVIDIA take the lead on that. So all things being equal, when we're looking at these cards kind of go back and forth in performance. You got AMD on top on some, you've got NVIDIA top on a couple others, and you've got some that are, 1440 is one and 1080p is another. So how do you make up your mind? We've already established that both of these are about the same price. Then it might come down to, what are you using it for? In my case, the PC that this RX 6600 XT came out of is in my living room. It's my gaming rig in my living room, hooked up to a 4K Samsung television. So for me, it's not doing any streaming. It's not doing any ray tracing. I don't have to worry about the extras that normally would come on that NVIDIA card that makes the NVIDIA card special. If I was doing video encoding, say I was streaming from that PC, or say I was doing video editing, or say I was playing a lot of games, Metro Exodus or Cyberpunk or any of those games that are really, really heavy in ray tracing, then maybe, or if I really just was in love with ray tracing, then maybe it would be the NVIDIA card that I would want more, that I would fall in love with and just have to have in my machine. As it stands right now, I can put the RX 6600 XT in the living room, and I can use this RTX 3060 for something else. Maybe another build, maybe something I'm going to sell to somebody, who knows, whatever. I do have an RTX 3060 that's in my editing rig. I'm not going to do a straight swap with that, because what my intention is there is to go ahead and put an RTX 3060 Ti in there, or something, maybe even one of the 40 series. I know, I shouldn't even think of that. What I'm probably going to end up doing is either put the 3060 Ti in, or if I can get a good deal, maybe a 3070 or a 3080, do that instead, because hopefully, hopefully, prices on that will come down just enough to make it worth my while and do something, because it's a Corsair 4000D, it's a decent sized case, but I don't want to try to fit a 4080 or 4090, and I'm not going to pay that much anyway. No, it's crazy. But anyway, so maybe it comes down to your use case. They both can be near the same price. They both perform very, very well. Just because one beats the other one in this game or that game doesn't mean they're not both very good cards, because obviously they are, especially in 1080 and in 1440p. They both do a phenomenal job. My other thought there is the RX 6650 XT is actually a shade cheaper, or comes in at the bottom end of what the RX 6600 XT cost. That's at the lower end of what these cards cost. That's probably a better deal. I'm just saying. Now, it's probably a better deal if I'm gaming. I don't know if the ray tracing or anything like that's any better, and I know it doesn't have as good of an encoder. So if I'm doing video editing or anything like that, it's not going to solve my purpose, or it's not going to solve what I need to do. But if I'm doing encoding using the CPU instead of the GPU, if I've got a CPU that has enough cores, I'm okay with that too. That H.264 encoder, it's not a bad encoder. It just uses a lot of CPU instead of GPU. Either one of these are excellent buys. And if you can get one available on sale for under $350, I would say that's probably the one you would go with. But for those of folks that only believe in the NVIDIA cards and they don't want to try an AMD card and they're scared of it, it's like, no, I don't know if I can rely on it. You can rely on it. It's a decent card. It's really pretty good card, actually. And I've found that a lot of these 6000 series cards, the feedback on those is really, really positive. So maybe not be afraid of it. Who knows? If you're an NVIDIA fanboy or an AMD fanboy, you probably aren't even watching this video because your mind's already made up. And you're probably saving up for something that's more like an RTX 3070 or a 6800 XT or whatever. So nothing I see in this video is going to make any difference. But for those of you that are sitting on the fence, or maybe don't want to try to find a 7000 series from AMD or a 4000 series from NVIDIA, yeah, maybe that mid-range from last series from one of these two is more in your neighborhood. So, but I don't know if I can help you make up your mind because the performance on both of these is right about the same. Anyway, sort of like the 6-core 12-thread processors that I was just looking at, where I thought one of them would beat the other one out, I'm finding pretty much the same thing here. And it either makes for a really good and informative video or just like, wow, that didn't help me at all video. I can't tell you which, and I'm sorry, but both of these, maybe it's peace of mind that, hey, I'm thinking about buying this. Is it any good? It stacks up pretty well. So, yeah, can't really complain there. So anyway, that is all I have for this time about that. Now, I do have other things coming. For instance, this RX 580 in a plain brown box just arrived from across the Pacific Ocean. And it cost me, with tax, shipping, and everything, $90. $90. Brand new RX 580. Now, this is a cut down version. This is a slightly slimmer version than your retail RX 580 that was available in the States 2 years ago, 3 years ago. But it should match up well with the RX 480. I was just testing in a budget build a couple weeks ago, maybe a month ago. So we're going to test those two against each other. That'll be coming up next. Anyway, like I said, this is all I've got this time. I hope it helped in some way, or at least gave you some information or some peace of mind. Maybe it gave you that. Don't forget to hit me up on all the socials. Like if you like the video. Subscribe if you're not already. I always appreciate that. Don't forget to do all those YouTube things and visit me on ThatPaulGuy.tech and all that good stuff. And if nothing else, if you don't do any of those things, I ask you one thing only, and that's just be nice to each other. I'll ask you every video from here on out. I've been asking for the past several months, and I'm going to keep doing it. Just be nice to each other. Be nice to somebody. Smile, wave, hold the door open, whatever. You don't know whose day you're going to make a little bit better just by being kind. And I got to give a shout out, because one of my last videos, somebody did that. They left a smiley face and told me, here's a smiley face for you. And you have no idea what that's like, knowing that somebody sees and hears the message and they share it. So thank you. Thank you very, very much. And sincerely appreciate it. Go out there and be good to each other. You don't have to be good to everybody. You don't have to try to make an effort of your whole day just doing nothing but being nice. But you know what? It doesn't hurt you to be nice once in a while. It's absolutely free, right? Don't forget about that, folks. So anyway, until next time when I get into this plain brown box, that's going to be fun, you know? I'll see you later.